Okay, well, I will now call to order the City of Newburgh Rate Review Committee meeting for today, February 10th, 2026. Natalie, will you please conduct roll call?
Derek Wharf, Enan Burkle, Mary Meyer, Leisha Adams, Derek Duff, Ned Knight, Ron Sinicki, Roger Coleman,
Here.
Peggy Gilbert.
Here.
And then we know Raquel is going to be absent.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, we'll now open the floor to public comment. Natalie, did we receive any public comments this week?
No, that we did not.
Okay, well, I'll now close the public comment session. And then on to the overview of utility rates, specifically stormwater and TUF projects. I'll now turn it over to staff for introductions and presentations. Okay.
Hello again, folks. So we're going to be doing the review of the CIP projects, and we're going to be looking at the areas of stormwater and the transportation utility funded projects. And just like last time, we're starting with things that we've just recently accomplished, and then we're going to be moving forward and looking at things that are still in the construction horizon for the first two biennia. So the 800 block Winooski outfall project was completed, and that actually was completed in this current period, $298.3373. That was $59,000 under budget. Staff were involved in doing a lot of work for that. There was some landscaping remediation that we did in-house to try and keep the cost down. We extended the outfall east of South Winooski. The purpose of this was to reduce erosion because it was washing out the hillside, and that has fixed that issue, and plants were planted which are now growing well to stabilize the soil in the area. And another one under budget. So you may have noticed a certain refrain, which is a very good number of our projects were completed under budget that are already finished in this current planning period. The West Franklin Stormwater Line, the expense total, $630,166.50. This was approximately $120,000 under budget. West Franklin Storm Line addressed persistent flooding in this area. It was flooding two homeowners, and also the Ultra Quiet Floors factory was getting flooded basically every year. So the new storm line is moving the water out of there, and it is 1,300 linear feet of new storm pipeline to remove flood. Now, I want to just stop for a minute to talk about this a little bit more, because this also taught us something. Pipe companies, construction companies are really hungry right now for work. The bidding on this was very fierce, and that's one of the reasons why this is so far under budget. What it's telling the city is we want to get as many straightforward pipe projects done, ones that don't require a bunch of construction work for trenching and pipes. We want to get as much of that done as possible, finished up this biennium and the next, to take account of this extremely high level of competition that we're seeing in the marketplace right now. The next item is the Stormwater Pipe Replacement Fund. As of this time, we haven't used that money in this biennium. You never know, as I've said previously, what you're going to find below grade. And this is a contingency to be ready for any pipes in the stormwater area that might crop up. And now I'm moving to the ongoing and the future projects. The North Springbrook Road Stormline project, the estimated total for the two biennia we're looking at is about $850,000. It is 25% system development charge eligible. The purpose of this, in a nutshell, is to combat significant surface flooding that occurs by replacing smaller lines with a larger 30-inch line to handle very heavy rain. We're particularly looking at those events that we've seen of a 4 or 5-inch flash flood event when we're getting water gathering on the surface. People have hydroplaned. It's not safe. We want to upsize this. So it's replacing 8-inch line with larger line. Yes, Ned.
How do you know to go all the way up to 30 inches from 8 inches? I mean, that's a huge increase, which would certainly handle it, but does it need to be 2.5 feet in diameter for that?
So as you know, I'm not an engineer, but I sometimes do play one on television. And this is one of those things. Our engineers who have looked at this have explained through the hydraulics and the flow that this is to soak a flash flood event. And there's not, given the cost of labor and mobilization, there's actually not a huge difference between how big we upsize the pipe once you have to do the trenching. It's more the mobilization and the labor which eats into the cost. So I can get you more data on this if you would like, on the specifics of why that size of pipe, but that was our recommendation.
That works. Thank you.
Yeah, we've gone a little, hang on. The space aliens are messing with my feed, even though I color coded the slides. Okay. Only a librarian would have color coded the slides the way I did. You noticed that, I assume. Okay. Oh, it's doing it again.
Space aliens are like.
They want you to go twice as fast, so.
Okay. We've never had this happen before. Okay, I tell you what, could you keep it on the display view, like the operator view like that, and we'll just click through the slides and I'll just say click or something, or, okay. Yeah, grab the slider and, yep, cheers. Okay, so the next thing is the stormwater master plan. That is actually quite far along. That's coming to council in the near future. We're estimating that we're going to be on budget for that one. It's 50% system development charge eligible. And there's a whole PowerPoint about this, which you can actually grab off of one of the recent council packets. The purpose of this is to recalculate our entire stormwater system. It is to develop future CIP projects to get ahead of flooding that might happen elsewhere. And it's to basically true up our stormwater model. Our town has grown a lot in the last 5-6 years. We want to true up the model. But let me say one thing, there's a future cost saving that was proposed not by city staff, but by Keller Engineering. We always appreciate their honesty. And if there was ever a chance to see that they're not just looking to line their own pockets, it was this. They proposed to us that we should change our municipal code and only do this every 10 years, that they didn't feel it was necessary every 5 years. That is them directly giving up future fees. I am very appreciative of that level of honesty.
Yeah, that makes sense and sounds like a good savings, but that begs a question. Is there a wastewater master plan? Is there a water master plan? And could those go to 10 years also for further saving?
Unfortunately, ones like the water master plan, which is connected to our water distribution license, are more driven by state regulations, and we don't have as much latitude as we do with the stormwater master plan, at least for now.
I was just gonna say too, a lot of the federal grants that we've looked at, they want you to have a more recent master plan, so, or you get excluded from being eligible for the grant. So those ones, I think, because we have big projects on the horizon, it might behoove us to do those a little bit sooner.
Question. So far on budget, approximately what percentage of this is completed and what percentage of the budget is remaining?
So for this one, we're about at the 60% run. But one of the things I've discovered with Keller is that they are able to stay on budget. So in other words, they give me, unlike some of, I better not say that. They are very transparent and honest in their price estimation, and we haven't had any change orders with Keller in a year and a half. So they take account of their internal variable. If they think there's going to be a margin that they need, they ask for it on the front end. We prefer it like that rather than getting that gotcha moment. There's a bit more about the Stormwater Master Plan update. So future maintenance costs will be estimated. A final report will come to council and the community. It will identify current and future problem areas. It will develop alternatives for future CIP, which you will then again see at these meetings. It will develop a fact sheet, project descriptions, purposes, and breakdown. The capital improvement table and location figures will be updated in PDF format, and it will estimate SDC eligibility for each of these capital improvements, which will then eventually feed into our system development charge table updates, which now occur every 2 years with the help of engineering and with Deb, who is the guru of system development charges in our state. Now on to the tough projects, the transportation utility fund projects. Currently, in this biennium, it has provided $1.3 million per year for road and ADA upgrades and repairs. I'm going to go through some of the things we've done, but it would be fair to say that from a dead stop, we have kicked this thing into high gear, because in 22 and 23, we were not doing a reasonable amount of road improvement. And since my micromanagement of engineering has begun, we are now moving a lot more rapidly on getting things finished. 2nd Street in districts 1 and 3 were slurry sealed. All of our parking lots were slurry sealed and crack sealed. The downtown areas had reference signs added so that people would know where the other parking lots were with QR codes. Other spot locations were ground and inlaid around town, including parts of Meridian. And perhaps most significantly, a 100% LiDAR scan of the entire city of Newburgh was accomplished, meaning that we now have surface conditions for all our surface roads without having to guess or interpret, without visual observation. We have laser reflection numbers for all of our streets.
Can I just say one quick thing?
Yes.
I just was gonna point out, we focused on districts 1 and 3 because those are the worst street conditions from our map, which we'll show you later. And council had identified those as council goals to focus on for road repair. So that's why you'll see that we are focusing our TEF money there.
And thank you, Katie. And adding on to that point, so when you see the map of the LiDAR results for the southern districts, we actually have the data for the whole city, but I've just shown you the area where we're really focusing on for the next 10 years. When I retire, all these areas will be green or yellow. They will not be red. In 2025, we did even more. Fulton Street was resurfaced and frankly rebuilt in some sections, including thermoplastic. Oh, sorry. Mountain Drive. Mountain Drive was 100% complete on crack sealing treatment. This included the northern portion of Springbrook in the vicinity. The ADA work, ramps and sidewalk improvements on South Centre Street were completed. You can now navigate almost the entirety of South Centre Street, and the road has been resurfaced except for the last block at the north end, which I'm going to get later. The grind and inlay repairs on South Centre Street completed. Slurry seal and cape seal with chips in it, with rock chips in it, was done on South Howard Street and South School Street and several blocks of East 3rd Street, all in southern districts, in order to extend the lifespan of those sections by another good 4 or 5 years, despite the Oregon weather. In 2025, we moved on. Fulton Street was resurfaced and rebuilt, as I mentioned. Fulton was repaved on the other side of Villa using the drag box method. So we did that in-house to save money. That's where you throw hot asphalt in a metal box and you physically drag it across the surface with a truck. It only works for small sections and it's not tidy, but it's cost effective for a small driveway. At the end of the summer, the library ADA was improved. Some tough funds were used to build the ramps next to the library book drop, whereas facilities money was used to pay for the ramp next to the door. Then Meadow Lane, which was basically unnavigable, was resurfaced. Now it's not in southern districts, but Meadow Lane was so bad that we just had to do it out of schedule, and that's been fixed. And that, by the way, is over $1 million. That was like $1.2 million of work. The sections we've done this biennium. We're about to launch another well over $1 million, probably $1.2 million, $1.3 million in this next cycle that's starting this summer. And I'm going to talk about what we're going to be doing next. So in 2026, our tough targets, and as you saw the last 2 years, we've met our targets. We'll be crack sealing the neighborhood on the north side of town off of Highway 19. We will be slurry sealing East Mountain View along North Springbrook Road. So as a reference point, the green sections, that's just crack sealing. So that's preserving the road so that it can be kept good and won't have to be ground and inlaid. The slurry seal is over the area we just crack sealed. The road condition's not bad on Mountain View since the work we've already done. There's one section of 3 blocks that I'm aware of I'm going to have to grind and inlay, but most of it is good, and part of it is brand new because of the Kalina development. Obviously, we're not doing that part. So that section, our estimate just came in. It's about $850,000 for the slurry seal. That's the blue section. The section in green is going to be about $100,000. And then the next thing is continuing with our council directive of trying to fix the ruined streets in the southern districts. The areas you see grind and inlay on South Meridian Street and East 7th Street, we are unfortunately right now having to build 50 ADA ramps, that's 50, in that purple area. We are not allowed to do grind and inlay without bringing those ramps up to the modern standard. That is a lot of expense. Each ramp is about $8,000 to $10,000, okay? As well as further south along neighborhoods near Ewan Young Park. Now, this bit on the slide is out of date. The PACER data has already been added and confirmed. So that has happened in the last few weeks, which is why we're able to now present you with the map that you're about to see with PACER data. And PACER is Pavement Surface Evaluation Rating, which means laser reflection from the surface. Rather than having to drill cores to establish a PCI, Pavement Condition Index number, you can get laser reflectivity to do it. We've also, with the help of our council, done a code change to adopt PACER as one of our evaluation tools, which it was not before. Okay, 2027 targets. Crack sealing neighbourhoods in the southeast of town along East Fernwood and Haynes Street. Slurry sealing further north in the neighbourhoods surrounding Foothills Drive, near Tomgale Park and Oak Knoll. Grind and inlay work, again, switching further south to North Main Street near Jaquith Park, crossing Meridian, Sierra Vista Drive, near George Fox, particularly that one feeder road that you know that's up on that west side, which is badly degraded, and more work to be done near Highway 240 off of South Grant and East Sheridan. Now, you may ask, why do we choose these particular street sections? We choose the street sections because these are ones where we know the pipe underneath the grind and inlay, not necessarily slurry seal, has already been upgraded to ductile iron or plastic pipe. In other words, it's not cast iron or tile. We do that because we don't want to cut open the grind and inlay sections, because grind and inlay can get you 7 years of road wear. So that is part of our policy. And as you know, I sent you the tough choosing policy, which we wrote just slightly over a year ago. Now let's look further afield. This gets a bit more speculative because I haven't with my own eyes seen the below grade pipe reports for these sections, but we're probably going to do that in 2028. Once we had a chance to analyze what the pipe is like. And if we have to dash in and get some pipe ahead of this, we're going to. We're doing a bit of that this summer, in fact. And then that is what we're looking at for 2029 pavement rehabilitation. We're going to consistently spend all of the tough money every year getting this stuff done. And this is a thing that could not have been developed 2 weeks ago. Alan McKeel, who is a gentleman and a scholar, has managed to add all of the PACER data to the GIS layer, which means if you email me now and say, what is the PACER rating of my street? I can email you right back and tell you what the PACER number is based on the LiDAR scan. And we only have to do a LiDAR scan every few years. That's the plan. Now, the sections that you see which are in excellent condition, those have just been repaired, ground and inlaid or recently slurry sealed. Yellow, some of those have been slurry sealed in the near past and they have only a small amount of cracking. And then you see we have poor, which means chunks are coming up, and failed. Failed means officially it's a failed road, which means that there is gravel showing in some sections. That's the definition of failed. So the area that you're looking at here, this is going to be our sandbox through this decade. The good news is that in the future, one day, once all of these sections have the ADA ramps, some future city manager will have cheaper road repair work because they won't have to pay for ADA once it's all done, assuming the state does not foolishly change the standard again. So that is the end of our exploration of our stormwater and TUF funded projects, including the development of our new technology. And I wonder if there are any other questions so far.
Roger, I see you have a question.
Yes, Will, you've talked about 10-year plans for stormwater and wastewater and others, and you show the map of maybe 10-year projects. Is there been any estimated cost for what those projects will cost to bring us up to a standard? And how does that fit into the budget?
So I think the best way for me to answer this is, Roger, I could literally spend any amount of TUF money that you gave me, and it would just accelerate the timeline for getting us closer. At our current rate of work, which has been about 7 street sections a summer, I think that in 10 years, we will get through the southern districts. We're moving along at a good clip. The expenditures, well, currently we've been using $1.3 million. That's going up, of course, every year because we are facing inflation from our companies like Eagle Elsner. I provided you with the future rate sheet for Eagle Elsner in the packet earlier. So you can see what our cost escalation, I believe it was about 7% cost escalation. Now, let me say this clearly and on the microphone. If I could get a larger agency such as our county to get involved in being a central road repair outfit and get some cost control, then we might not need to think about our costs escalating the way that they have been doing in the last few years because it's commercial vendors. I've been asking the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments if they would be interested in stepping in and setting up a road repair crew. I've also asked our county on numerous occasions if they would be interested in doing so. In other words, having a central agency where we would only be one part of the puzzle and get some cost control on this. But so far, I have not been able to get any of those folks to really have interest in it. We're not a big enough agency to buy the equipment ourselves. I can now tell you what that equipment would cost because I've worked it out. It is $1.7 million to buy the capital equipment in terms of rollers, grinders, and a paving machine. We're not big enough for that. If we had some interest from some of our neighbours in going in together, we could look at getting capital equipment and that would bring down our tough expenses. But for now, it's market driven.
Question. What are you hearing from community members? I mean, what areas of town, I would assume the southern districts, but what areas of town are you hearing people complain about or send in work requests for?
So we're hearing from Southern District folks that they're very happy. They can see what we're doing and they can see our plans and they can see we're actually executing on our plans, which the city didn't always do. The singular source of complaint that we continue to receive is on the gravel streets. We hear very frequently, probably every other month, somebody reaches out to me from that area. I didn't bring a separate map for that, but I could for the last session if you would like me to. Those are those completely unimproved streets. And those sections would require $2.5–3 million of money invested to completely construct 1.5 miles of streets. So that's what we would be looking at. It'd be $2.5 million, something like that. That area would like us to do something on that. I don't think if we were to focus on that, we would have to change the tough legislation, which is currently intended only for repair work. It's not intended for construction work. Or we would have to find another revenue stream. In terms of the priorities of the city, the NURA committee and the council has made it clear to me that River Street has to come first for a variety of reasons, partly because it's an economic engine for the city. The estimate for River Street may be in the region of $8 million based on our latest numbers. So we certainly cannot do two major projects like that at the same time.
What would the effect of, so what you've just mentioned, River Street and repaving all gravel roads, say $10 to $11 million, what would be the effect on those numbers roughly if we had the access to the equipment either at a county level or a regional government level?
I think that if we could get a few partners to come on board with us, especially if one of them was MAC, and I don't know yet if we're going to get any traction, but if we could get some people to partner with us, then I would expect that we could spend a lot less money on grind and inlay. It would still take a legislative change to change the tough rules so we could use it on construction. If we were able to reduce our costs by $400,000 or something per year, we could save up so that at least in 4 or 5 years, we could tackle the gravel area. We can tackle the River Street project because it's in the Nura area. We're going to use Nura funds to help with that. So 4 or 5 years of savings, if we could get some traction on somebody being willing to be the central financial factor for that. I'm working the problem. I've been working the problem for 2 years without any success. This would be my dream, is for someone to be able to do that and help us. We would help buy the equipment, but we can't do it alone.
A radical idea. You said the equipment purchase is about $1.7 million. So, and the budget amount right now is 1.3 million. There's not that much difference. Suppose you were to stop road improvements for 1 year to purchase the equipment. And then, no, seriously, what would the savings be?
That didn't include
then-
staffing because we'd have to hire people who can run these
Well,
equipment.
I knew there'd be something
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on, but I just thought I'd throw it out because
It is a fair question.
because after the equipment comes, there'd be a major savings and you could do quite a bit more.
I would say that I still don't feel we're quite big enough to have our own paving crew. We would have to add 4 FTEs. That's a problem. And it's a problem that hits the other part of the rates because those FTEs would be coming out of transportation funds. It'd be far more manageable if we just had 1 or 2 partners to share the cost, and then everything would get cheaper because Mac is using the same. If anyone in Mac is listening to this right now, I hope you are. Mac is using the same vendors that we are: Eagle Elsner, Santium, Doolittle. We're all paying the piper, and when the piper decides to drive to Arizona, they're out of here. And we've been bumped before on the schedule as well. Like, I believe it was last year, I had finished personally leafleting a neighborhood, and then they said, oh, we can't come that week after all. So we had to go pull all the leaflets, tell everybody, I'm so sorry, we got to look like egg on our face, right? So that's the other problem, is we are not a big customer for these people. We're not Eugene, we're not Portland. They don't have an incentive to give us a set time. It's always a fraught negotiation. I just think we need a partner to get our costs down.
Yeah, the staffing costs are what really hurt that idea. If we could do it with existing staff, I think that'd be a different story, but I don't think that we have staff currently that have the skills to run that machinery that I'm aware of, but.
We don't. We have one guy who's been a junior guy on a road crew, not ran the big skid steer equipment. We don't have a person time served. This is a dangerous piece of equipment. The guy running it has to be an expert. It can rip up manhole covers. It can rip up sidewalk if you do it wrong. This is a serious bit of kit.
Would the FTE have to be year round? Could it be contracted? I mean, if we own the equipment, could we contract a crew seasonally? Because obviously we're not paving roads year round. Would they have to be on staff at the city?
Given how hard it was just to hire 3 people for the sidewalk crew, we've had some learning here. Private industry is paying 1.5 or more than we pay on the hourly rate for these tradesmen. And many of the younger guys aren't thinking about retirement. They're not thinking about the other benefits, especially if they don't have a family. So we found it very hard to recruit people. It took us nearly a year to build out the sidewalk crew. I feel even with the best HR team in the world, which I have, it would be really hard to staff that up and then not have it staffed. And there's nobody like Pacific or whoever can't get us people that can run this equipment. Now we can get guys to do crack sealing, and we have in the summertime. A lot of that crack sealing was done affordably with just temp labor. but we can teach a guy to run a crack sealing machine in 1 day. So it's a different deal.
Sorry, one more question. I'm probably not the only person who saw the article in the Newsberg about the mayor doing his kind of walkabout town in the motorized wheelchair. Are there, you mentioned ADA access and like the cutaways and things as part of major renovations. Are there people from the wheelchair using community who are giving input on priorities for them in terms, there are probably neighborhoods where the streets are okay, but they are heavily or would be heavily trafficked by people with mobility issues aside from those issues?
So we actually have an ADA subcommittee headed by Roy Gathercole, who is a wheelchair-bound individual. He meets with the city every 2 months. He looks at what we're thinking about and our planning. He gives us feedback. But to be frank, my dollars can only go so far right now. I don't have a separate sidewalk replacement fund. So our sidewalk and ADA work is adjacent to grind and inlay work. With that said, we are steadily making the city more ADA friendly with every piece of grind and inlay that we do.
Part of the issue also seems to be that the sidewalks and corners are often homeowner, property owner responsibility. Is there any outreach or coordination happening to facilitate homeowners who might want to improve their sidewalk but don't have the expertise or?
Yes. So we actually have 9 approved vendors who can do sidewalk repairs. They're on a list. They're known to engineering as well as the code enforcement officer. Now, sometimes this journey begins with a neighbor calling Officer Winter. We have a flow chart which tells people at each step how they can get help to do their sidewalks in terms of an affordable company. I recently reached out to Concrete Solutions, which was a company that we've entered a multi-year contract with for price control. And I asked Chris if we would be allowed to extend that city pricing to homeowners. He very generously said yes, which he did not need to say. So we can now use his pricing with any homeowner who wants to do this work. That is kind of the limit of our advance. We have our own sidewalk crew, but our own sidewalk crew, half of every season is working on ramps for our own ADA work. I didn't even realize when I recruited the sidewalk crew how little bandwidth they would have left for doing homeowner stuff. So at the end of the construction season, we might have some jobs that they can tackle for people, but the bulk of it is going to be focused on these ADA ramps.
Sorry, I have 900 questions.
And I'm glad that I can answer them all, said no city
So far.
manager ever.
You've issued a challenge now. Okay. I assume that at some point there are fines associated with violations, and where do those, how are those fines enforced, and what bucket do those fines go into?
Yes. So the end of that flow chart ends in a lien on your house. Yes. Yes. So if the person doesn't, once a report has formally been made to code enforcement and they follow up, I didn't bring the timeline with me, but there's a good long bit of time someone has to respond and to act. Come the end of that journey, the city is going to fix that sidewalk section, and then the city will put a lien on that person's house for the value of the repair. So that's the way that journey ends. Now, in the last couple of years, we haven't had to do that. When Officer Winter has explained the scenario, the situation, the homeowner has been compliant in fixing that section.
When a property goes up for sale, is the improvement of the sidewalk part of the requirements?
Frontage improvements trigger when we do, if there's any kind of renovation work, also when a property changes hands, any liens on the property are then cashed out.
But even if the lien, if it's not reached the point of a lien, if they're at any point in that timeline and the property changes hands, is there any tracking of that or triggering?
Unfortunately, although the address is tracked, the clock would begin again. So we would start again with the new homeowner. Hey, Mr. Smith, I'm glad you're loving a new home, but we've already got an active file on this piece of sidewalk. We need you to come into compliance. So yes, I guess that's as one thing you could flip your house at the last minute. Hopefully people won't think that way.
Is that something that the city council like that could be changed in the code to where if you have an open file on your frontage, you're not allowed to transfer property ownership until that's been resolved?
I believe that that would trigger a constitutional takings claim and therefore would be unwise legislation. I think it's better to seek voluntary compliance than courting that type of lawsuit. I've had some experience with that type of lawsuit. Actually, do you have any harder ones?
So in relation to like a consortium of sorts, getting back to, because this was everyone's favorite topic, if there was a group put together and we had additional capacity, would you be able to bid for like a McMinnville job if they weren't part of that consortium, or is it really refined to that group specifically?
So if there was a consortium of willing local government partners, we could create an intergovernmental agreement like we've done with the school district, like we've done with the county on Rogers Landing and other things. We would stabilize our pricing, because what we would do is, but let me explain, there's a little caveat here, okay? There always is. As long as petrochemical futures remain stable, we would stabilize our pricing. We would have a known depreciation schedule for the capital equipment. We would have a known steps increase for the staff. What we couldn't crystal ball gaze is the petrochemical aspect, which is a main component of asphalt. But I still think that with that resource shared among many cities, the equipment depreciation would be shared among many cities. That would be a savings. And I think we would get more grind and inlay done that way.
Roger has a question.
Will you receive funds from the state for transportation projects and things? How does that fit into the budget and this process?
So the money that we get as pass-through money, things like gasoline, tax revenue, that is what we accumulate in the transportation fund to pay for those big projects like Elliott Road, helping with projects like River Street, when we eventually rebuild Main Street. That money is used for full depth road repairs. It's not used for maintenance. Now, if there were no tough fund tomorrow, then that would make us choose to have to do one or the other thing. And if we deferred the maintenance that's done with grind and inlay and crack seal and so on, we would be making a whole lot of big future projects for ourselves on full depth road reconstruction. And full depth road reconstruction is one order of magnitude more expensive than doing road maintenance. So instead of a $200,000 or $300,000 project, or even a $900,000 project, you would be paying a $7, $8, or $9 million project to completely rebuild the street. So that's where the pass-through revenue goes. We always hope that the state will come up with a better funding formula, something more based on miles driven and less on gasoline usage, to account for all the different types of vehicles that now use our roads, and the fact that EVs and some hybrids have a heavier axle weight for the same class of vehicle, and therefore actually do more damage to roads. So that's something that we would like to see, but that we don't have any power over that.
Thank you.
I thought of another question. We are seeing a massive uptick in electric bicycles and electric scooters, both on the roads and on the sidewalks. Is there any planning or anticipation of need to facilitate their increasing presence in the city?
This actually harkens back to your comments earlier about complaints. The main way this has entered the public discussion has been complaints about unsafe driving habits from small electric vehicles. Currently, there is no code regulating this. I would expect the honourable councillors are probably going to, maybe in the next year, take up something if we keep hearing from the public about safety concerns. With regard to taxing them, I don't think they create a lot of wear and tear, but they do seem to be a safety nuisance, and council is aware.
Perhaps a licensing fee.
Okay. We'll start with, so backtrack a little bit to stormwater and, oops, did I? There we go, yeah. Stormwater is well, no, actually Tough is the newest of the fees, stormwater being second newest. And it really relies on rates and systems development charges for funding. 93% approximately of the annual revenue comes from the rates. There are minimal other fees that are really just related to development review and inspection. The stormwater rate histories shown here, you see in 2013, 2014, double-digit rate increases. What you have to remember is that, I can't remember the year the utility was formed, but a 17.5% rate increase back in 2013 was probably, 50 cents or something like that, because we started from such a low rate, maybe a $5, kind of where the Tough is now. Fast forward to today, and the current rate is about $19 per month per equivalent dwelling unit. So it was really been a building period of just creating the utility, first having the utility cover the cost of operation and maintenance costs, keeping pace with inflation, and then introducing a capital component, a reserve component, like as we've talked about for water and wastewater. So this, and the last rate update was 6.5% rate increases, which were also projected for subsequent years. But luckily, through the city's work in refining the capital improvement plan, we are looking at recommending lower rate increases than had been projected. This, is there no way to put that into presentation mode, not with the sidebar? Does that always show that? Oh, got it. Okay, yes. Oh, that's what that was. Oh, yeah, okay. Sorry. All right, so the capital improvement plan really in the next couple of years, about over $1 million per year, and then budgeted out at about $500,000 per year. As we get further out in the plan, it's, that's why you do these things every couple of years as capital improvement projects are identified, then those potentially could get added. But lots of work has gone in, as has been talked about, to right-sizing the CIP to really what's needed within the planning period. The stormwater system does not have any outstanding debt, nor is any new debt anticipated, because luckily there are there is cash from the current rates and reserves. So it's in a good equilibrium in terms of meeting projected needs with some additional coming in from SDCs to pay for portions of projects that provide capacity for growth. This just shows, you know, again, that in projecting revenue compared to what we were showing before, really generally right on track. Just the revenue forecast is slightly lower than it was previously because, as we've discussed, there was a little bit of a slowdown in growth in the last couple of years. So the 10-year, oh yeah,
Question.
go ahead, Derek.
What was the cause for the drop between fiscal year 27 and 28? We go from what looks to be rates and reserves, just between $1 to $1.2 million. And then we drop to about half of that. So what's the cause of the funding there, the drop in funding?
So this is just a graphical depiction of this table
Oh,
with
okay.
the capital improvement plans. And at this point, it's you've got a couple of, well, that one West Franklin project that's pretty expensive. And when that drops off, then it kind of.
Okay.
is-
I thought that was influx of revenue, not
no,
project cost.
no, that's the anticipated need for capital.
Influx of water.
Oh, yes. Prioritizing investment spending.
I have a mechanical question while
Sure.
you're back on that table, if you don't mind.
No,
The second row, maintenance facility improvements. What facility for stormwater? What am I missing?
great.
So that is a portion share of several things that were done at the yard, and they were charged to each of the utilities to spread load the cost. The projects were ones that would benefit all utilities and the workers who work in them. These included a wash bay that would be allowed to wash vehicles more effectively, where the staff built it themselves. So we did the rebar, we did the pour. They included a fueling station, so we could get our gas and diesel at $1 less than the pump price. They also included building a retrofit of some work in Building C, and they also included a new garage building that now holds things like the sweeper and the vac truck, because those are really expensive and we don't want them stolen. So that is all together. It was from all the utilities. We did a little bit every year, and we can now see that we're basically finished on our yard improvements for the foreseeable future.
Good, thank you.
Okay, so this chart shows the projected expenses and the projected revenue based on a 4.5% per year rate increase, down from the 6.5% that was anticipated previously. The black line shows the reserves, so you are eating into your reserves to fund the short-term capital improvements. And then it's really just kind of an inflationary increase, and the reserve line dips down a little bit. So I really wouldn't recommend something less than the 4.5% rate increase, because we would be eroding the ability to fund capital. You'd be losing, one step forward, two steps back kind of thing. So the 4.5 seems to balance pretty well with the projected, both the capital improvements and the forecast increases in operation and maintenance costs. The legend shows debt transfers, but you don't see that color in the bar chart because there is no debt. So it's really just about cash funding capital, personnel, and other operation and maintenance costs. Oops, went the wrong way. The rates are shown in this table. So a 4.5% rate increase results in less than $1 increase on the stormwater bill. So that we look at going from 1906 to 1992 and then 2081. The non-residential customers are charged a sliding fee based on the number of equivalent dwelling units as measured by the impervious area on their property. Any questions, more questions on stormwater before we go to tough?
This might be a silly question, but I mean, with stormwater, it's basically assumed that rain falls equally regardless of what it's falling on. Is that the idea? So it's relatively flat rate?
Right. Well, so for residential, single family residential, the assumption is that the universe of residents have, you know, typical, less variability in the amount of impervious area on their lot than non-residential, which you can have huge differences, right? If you're talking about, you know, like a Fred Meyer versus a small retail or something like that, or office building. So I will say that one of the trends in the industry has been, though, to implement tiered single-family rates that, so you would have a small, like maybe 3 or 4 categories of charges or tiers. So and it can sometimes be based on, like in Portland, we helped develop a tiered rate structure where it's based on the property tax records that show the size of the property, and then there's some assumed coverage of impervious area, you know, that's uniform for everybody. So it really scales with your lot size. It's not a perfect estimate. Others will use LiDAR data or something to go through and try to estimate those for each customer. But now, you know, as the fees grow, you know, when it was $5, like the tough, it's like, you know, going through that effort to try to classify customers into different tiers, it's a lot of work to develop and then maintain in the billing system. We're now reached $20 a month at a certain point, maybe, sorry. I just gotta, you know, say what's done in the industry in some places. So
And what about like apartment complexes where there would be a high
they
impervious, but
are
it's residential?
charged based on the actual square footage of, so any really large customer is right now being charged based on its actual impact as estimated by the impervious area. It's just the residential, the single family, sorry, residential. And I think duplex probably falls in that category too. Yeah. Good thing you can't reach.
Let me just say, be careful what you wish for, because a lot of people, if they find themselves one click above or below a certain line, are going to be really unhappy teddy bears.
Well,
Yes.
and then from a tiered system, there's an administration portion of that, correct? So like the city of Portland, I'm sure has lots of individuals to do this, whereas I'm guessing the city of Newburgh doesn't. So, I mean, I just don't know how much value there would be to gain by having like a multi-tiered system from that perspective, and how much administration would go into that.
Here's our drone scanning.
There you go.
Operator protection staff
Yeah.
that we have right now.
You could do a voluntary, you know, you could go to each resident and say, how much impervious like pavement do you have? And they'll probably all look at you with a strange eye and be like, what's impervious pavement? But yeah, so I agree. I mean, I don't know how complicated we need to get with this stuff.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on to tough then. So for the tough,
Sorry.
yeah.
One more stormwater question. With housing developments and the trend, I think within housing developments being smaller green spaces, or, you know, smaller individualized green spaces, more of the kind of row house or condo style, rather than a large family dwelling with a large backyard, front yard, et cetera. Would there, I mean, yeah, would there be in the future like a need to maybe evaluate new builds in a different way than you evaluate existing structures?
So I actually asked this question to our engineering staff fairly recently, and the answer is that some of the interesting designs that we're seeing to have more units in a smaller area actually often have a very similar impervious surface, because what they're giving up is traditional front and back yards. They're not necessarily giving up the walkway or the garage or even the double car garage, which are all exciting selling points for those housing units. So we don't anticipate that we're going to need to have two tiers, one based on yardlessness. People are just giving up their real estate, or rather they can't get their real estate because of poor decisions made by the state of Oregon about the urban growth boundary.
But wouldn't that, maybe I'm not understanding, but wouldn't yardlessness have a negative impact on stormwater because you have less green space to absorb runoff?
Yes, but overall, there's often, and with new builds, more non-permeable concrete poured. I just don't think it's moving the needle a lot. What would really move the needle is if our urban growth boundary could expand in a rational way instead of always be where it has been for the last 40 years.
Okay. I think, you know, we've talked quite a bit about the need for the TUF, the gas tax and the problems with gas taxes. And this pie chart just shows that there's a lot of other costs that that need to be covered, and gas tax is insufficient to cover those. So really, the TUF is needed for the pavement preservation, as has been discussed. Just another pie chart that shows of the total transportation funding. So the TUF is projected to be about 1.4 million, and the gas spike and various taxes about 2 million. And then there's just some other incidental fees and charges that generate some revenue. The changes to the TUF are based on city code. You can make recommendations to adjust the TUF either for three different factors: cost of service adjustment, basically, you know, we need it to fund the projects. We're not there yet at doing the amount of work that is needed to achieve the pavement condition that the city desires. Inflationary adjustments, of course, including looking at the engineering news record construction cost index, and then other adjustments for changes in road conditions or other revenue sources. I'd say all of these three reasons support the recommendations for the TUF increases going forward, because there's a need for, in terms of projects, there's rising costs, and from both an ENR perspective as well as just the other materials that we've talked about. This gives you a chart that compares the rate as it was first adopted in 2017. And unfortunately, that rate stayed flat for years. And we've talked about some of the challenges of losing ground when there's no rate increase. And so the cumulative, when we look at the cumulative inflation versus where we are in terms of the TUF. Now, Rate Review did a great service to the road condition in the city of Newburgh by recommending a large percentage rate increase in 2025 that really helped to right the ship a little bit. We still have some ground to catch up, but it's not, instead of being 30 or 40% like it was when we did this process last time, the catch up is about 10%. If you were to do it, you know, again, do another large increase. What's recommended is the 4% that we're, staff believe that, and I think was demonstrated, that the revenue is sufficient now to make some dent in the problems every year. Of course, more money could be spent, but balancing the affordability issues as well as the need to fund the projects, the 4% is recommended to continue.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
The last time we did this, there was another piece of the pie that was on here related to some capital improvements we had on Villa that was projecting some revenue capture associated with that. I don't see that here now. I know that we've restarted that project and we've installed new cameras associated with that. How are we getting the revenue we're anticipating out of those new cameras? And again, I think they've been operational for maybe a month or so now.
Yes, so the red light cameras are actually going towards our debt reduction.
Oh, it is. Okay.
So that's going towards removing that communication officer line item from the billing statement. They've been operational, I believe it was January 21st. And so actually today was the first court day where we had people in court for red light cameras. So it is so far meeting our expectations on what we were projecting for citations.
Of course, two key things about this. It's not about revenue generation. It's about people not driving like fools.
Yeah.
But the second thing is on that, this is funding, of course, that is helping the general fund.
Yeah.
Which is still useful because we're
Mhm.
getting a piece of debt off. And there's a line item on your billing statement that won't be there in July.
Yep.
Because of this debt reduction work.
Yeah. I just remember the last time we did this, that line was specifically under transportation and I didn't see it here.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So with the 4% rate increase, the fee would go from $6.86 current to $7.14 and then $7.42 for a typical residential customer. So that's less than 40-cent increase per month per year. The fees for other housing and non-residential are shown in this table. And it's based on the square footage of the building for most non-residential. There are some other classes of customers where like schools that are charged based on the number of students and things like that. And you can see those increases here for multifamily unit. The type of housing, once you go from single family, the cost per unit decreases because the estimated trip generation of those different types of dwellings is less than a single family. So it's all based on estimated use of the roadway system as measured by the type of use and the size of the customer. And finally, we promised to bring you back what all this rolls up to together in a residential customer bill. At the next meeting, we'll bring you comparisons with other communities for these same total bill. And you can see for purposes of this comparison, I'm using the 4.1% increase for sewer. We brought to you the 3.5% and the 4.1% option. This uses the more aggressive INI, infiltration and inflow improvement schedule, 4.1% scenario. And I believe the committee will discuss that at the next meeting, right?
Yeah.
So you can see here that the total bill includes that communications officer on the bill at $2.78. And the total bill is about almost $182 for a typical customer, which is defined by the number of units shown in the middle of the chart there. 7 units of water consumption, 5 units of sewer. That would increase to 186, close to 187. So it's about a $5 or 2.8% increase, helped by the removal of that communication officer, that percentage and dollar increase. So the 2028 increase would be more both in dollars and percentage wise because we don't have that same kind of $2.78 discount in that year.
say a quick thing about this? So this is important because this is a down payment on the future. If we can get our wastewater debt retired early, it will have a much bigger positive effect than this first piece of debt reduction. But this is the proof of the pudding of the concept of let's try to get rid of our debt early.
And then are these the recommended rates or are they just we'll get the recommended rates in 2 weeks, I assume, but is that indicative of what these rates show here?
You're going to publish, I think the city's going to publish the rate schedules associated, the detailed rate schedules. So these reflect those rates. And I guess on the sewer, that was the only one where we were kind of looking at two different options. So if you want to take.
Yeah, I'm planning on publishing the 4.1, but the committee can always recommend a lower
Sure.
one. It's just better to publish the higher one
Absolutely.
just in case. So for the next meeting is going to be our town hall. So I'm doing the public notice for that and we've pushed it out on our social media and website. So that will give the public an opportunity to come in and testify their opinion on these increases that the city is proposing. And so the committee will get a chance to hear that feedback and then be able to discuss what we've proposed and ask any other additional questions and then make an official recommendation that we will take to city council for an approval for what we're going to do with the rates. So that's what you can look forward to for the next meeting.
Yeah. And Ron could probably go through how many, I don't know how many times Ron's done this, but I'm guessing most of the feedback we're going to get is in relation to challenges with fixed incomes and increases in these rates. Do we have something that as a staff and as a city, we can provide those people going out to say like, hey, we really appreciate the testimony you provided. If you're not aware, these are some of the supports and systems that are available. Like if we could just do that 2 weeks from now, I think that would be a really big help.
Yeah, we'll make sure to bring some of our resources in. The city dedicates a portion of our budget to resources for that we give out to Whitecap and then other churches and nonprofits. And then so if somebody comes to utility billing and says they're struggling to pay their bill, we know which of these nonprofits and churches that we've given money to. And so we usually send them to them for resources for payment. We also have our military and low income discounts where we have select amount of slots once a year that are available at the beginning of the year. So we can bring all of that to remind everybody about those as well.
And just before your session, we made a modification to how they do that so they can move those funds. So whatever nonprofit is successful in handing them out, we were not utilizing all the credits available. We are now, have been 100%?
Yes.
Yeah, so we made a little changes so that I think it's your role if I'm mistaken.
Yeah.
That has the ability to move it so that we're 100% helping the community to go off and reduce those utility costs.
Yeah, that's a good point because we always keep in track with them and we say, hey, you have this amount of money. Are you going to use it? Because otherwise you're going to lose it and we're going to give it to a different agency who will use it. So we make sure we use 100% of those funds every year.
Do you see that? Is it generally the same kind of segment of the population are on these programs from year to year? And is there, is that kind of locked in for them or is there, how is the system determined, for example, for the military or the senior citizens? Like, is it a lottery or how is that determined?
So the military, so there's two separate piles. So there's the military and the low income that are $25 a month. And we have only select amount of slots for those that the city will take off on your bill. Those are first come, first serve, and we open those up. Is it June 1st? June 1st. And we put that on the website and it's all about who gets their application in. And once the slots are filled, then we'd let everybody know it's closed. And then our other pot of money is where we give money to the nonprofits and churches. And so that we do that allocation the first of the fiscal year. And so that's kind of based on which nonprofits and churches apply for the program. And then based on usage and stuff of that, some of them didn't use their funds. And so then they opted out not to apply for them again. And so it's just kind of based on who's applied and who's used it for that process.
Is there, do you feel confident about the equity of representation for that system, especially with the nonprofits?
Yeah, we give our biggest amount of funding to YCAP, and I think that they have the biggest outreach in our community by far for who they're in touch with and who people want to go to. We do give also a fair amount of money to a diverse amount of churches, and that gets pretty well spent as well, just because that reaches a different group of populations. We always open it up to new applicants. So if there's another church or a nonprofit in the city, we always welcome them to apply and get some of the funding that's available, just to diversify who we give it to.
And if I'm not mistaken, if somebody is in need, they can reach out to the city and the city can help guide them to where the
Yes.
funds are available. So
Yes.
there's that piece too. So if we're not, that involves somebody actually reaching out to the city and communicating that, but there's a connection piece. So
Yes.
it's not just focused on one area where you may not hear nonprofit X communication.
Can I ask the committee a question?
Yes?
Okay. Would you guys support more red light cameras if a portion of the money was used to help people struggling to pay their bills, if it was dedicated for that purpose? I'm just curious. I mean, I'm not being funny. I'm asking seriously.
I personally am more like in favor of like a local gas tax in addition to, rather than a red light camera, just because in general, I think it's a lot easier to spread those costs over a smaller amount. Again, I don't know what the administration of that cost would look like, but for some families, that specific ticket can be relatively punitive, which would be my general challenge with it. So I'm generally more in favor of that. I will say I do appreciate that our speed limits are 12 and not 7 like in Sherwood. So you really kind of have to be going through that light at a pretty high rate of speed. But yeah, I generally would be more in favor of that. But certainly everyone else is willing to.
I would be really interested to know the impact of the red light cameras on City of Newburgh residents versus people from outside the municipality. And that proportion would maybe be, yeah, I think that would be really interesting in terms of like, if more red light cameras make more sense for getting dollars spent in our city.
Just curious.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing from everyone because it's a great question. I go along with Derek as far as the implementation. I'd much rather see a gas tax. That's why I've been advocating in the past.
I think that maps really well with our sectors too, being an agritourism sector, a big part of that. And I know that that kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, but if we have a general public outside of Newburgh using our roads to go to these places and they're filling up in the city of Newburgh, I think that would be, I think we would potentially gather more revenue that way. But I also think that would map along with maybe some of the usage or the concerns, you know, how you talked about with electric vehicles and things of that nature. Obviously, we can't mitigate for that per se, but yeah, that's in my favor. I would prefer red light cameras versus increasing tough fees on residential personally as well. But again, I don't think we're going to be able to increase that volume enough to offset the cost or increases. So.
If we think about future strategies and talk to council about ways to help people.
I have one other thought, and that is, and I've said this in the last iteration, what really bothers me are the gravel roads that we still have. Frankly, I think it's an embarrassment. So I think whatever source of funding we can get to pave those roads that should have been paved years ago, whether it's a red light camera, whether it's a gas tax, whatever, I think that should be moved up the priority list.
Because of the request from the last time we gathered together, we've actually done the analysis. So I know what the revenue yield would be from a 2 cents gasoline tax. It would be approximately $350,000 a year.
I had it explained to me one time because somebody in my district asked about getting a little piece of Sierra Vista, is it Sierra Vista, paved? And somebody told me, who's with the city, that that would have to be paid for by the people living on that street. And that when the developer came in, he or she chose to keep it gravel. And as a result, their value of their homes is lower, which saves them property taxes every year. So, I mean, I'd choose pavement over lower taxes, but is that correct? The people would be, the residents would be responsible to pay for the pavement?
So yes, that's correct. The organic condition of those houses has a lower property tax position than they would have if that became improved. My thinking about the gravel section is we would honestly begin by asking the residents who live there if they are willing to give up that 2 foot of frontage for free to the city and not expect the city to pay them for the frontage, which we would have to take some frontage in order to put in the sidewalks. And of course, we have to put the sidewalks in to put a street in. So that would be the beginning point of the discussion. But if we instituted a gasoline tax, if the council chose to do that, for any of these purposes, if it were to fix that gravel section, we would still need to accumulate multiple years of that revenue to get there. Yeah.
And as far as priorities, I hear more about people struggling with fixed incomes and the overall helping more with utilities than gravel roads. There has been an effort over a period of time. Kings Grade is my favorite. That was like a roller coaster ride going down. If you ever done the gravel part, it's now paved. They're slowly being fixed, but I think that helping others has been the primary thing we've heard in the public section.
Just back to the red light camera for a second. What about speed cameras? I mean, are those an option as well?
It's there, they have both facilities, both capabilities in the places where ODOT allows us to. So it depends upon what the ODOT engineers are willing to give us for a license. In some locations, they see it as only speed necessary, some both, and then we have to do what the license says.
Because I'm just thinking on 219, yeah, as you come into town, the box was there for a couple of weeks, but no camera. And I mean, I probably would have gotten dinged like 5 or 6 times on that road. But oh wait, was this recorded? But yeah, just wondering. Yeah, I was just curious about like there's a little more fluidity, I think, about speed cameras than red lights.
Just out of curiosity, I'm guessing, would Springbrook, because we used to have them on Springbrook and Portland Road 99W. And then there was a proposed one on Main as well. I'm just curious where those might be at.
So Springbrook, we've asked time and time again, and ODOT will not reapprove that one because of the improvements
She
done.
asks every month.
Yes, we ask all the time on Springbrook because it's the logical one where there's the most action there. And according to our police chief, it's very hard to patrol because of the length of the intersection. There's no good spot to patrol it. So you would think it would be a prime one for us, but no, it is not. And I also thought a prime one would also be by the hospital because that's an easy one coming off of Rex Hill. But
However,
ODOT also disagreed with that. So
and in the case of the hospital, they said because of the Crestview Crossing lights reconstruction, the data had to reset.
yes.
So any crash counts that we had were invalidated by the change of the signalized intersection. So it will take many years to get back to 7 or 8 years of data for that one. We have a license, which we haven't implemented yet, to put one on Main Street in the other direction downtown, and that's a speed camera. I personally would like to see one near Le Schwab to get the people who are stopping Ned and I from leaving our neighborhood because they're screaming past. So those are a couple of likely spots.
That being the case, rate review committee meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much for coming. See you again in 2 weeks.